take a look up there, and you'll see a wonderful portrait of one of the Tors of Dartmoor. This one is called Sharp Tor. Dartmoor, a wonderful place full of myths and legends. I'm sure you've heard of the hairy hands. Do you know about Vixana, the witch who lived near Princetown? I'm sure you've heard of the Beast of Dartmoor. And everyone knows about Sherlock Holmes and the Hound of the Baskervilles. Well, one of my favourite stories comes from the east of the moor, and there is a marvellous granite column, some 12 metres high. It's called Bowermans Nose. If you look at it carefully, you will see, well, it looks like a man who is frozen, turned to granite. You will see in the 7 layers, there's the top part and a peak cap. Then you see a forehead, you see a nose, a chin, a neck, and narrow shoulders. And there is a great legend based on how this rock formation came to be. They say in the 11th century, there was a tall, strong hunter called Bowerman. He would often go up onto the moor, particularly at Hayne Manor. He would hunt and stalk hares and other game to be found. Often he would lie in wait, waiting for his prey to come by. One afternoon, as he was lying on the scrubland, he heard a sound. He looked further down and he saw not a wild boar snuffling around, not even one of the wolves of Dartmoor that existed then. It might have been an otter, perhaps, but no. It was not the sound of a wild creature, but the sound of some wild women. Ha! There was a coven of witches celebrating some ritual or other, and they were in a circle, dancing round and round one way, and wailing and screeching as they danced another way. They were jumping up into the air. They were singing strange songs. And Bowerman, well, in the absence of being able to capture a hare or other game, he thought he'd play a game of his own. He waited until the women were in a wild frenzy, and then he jumped up and he roared as he ran down towards those women. They stopped in shock. They stopped in wonder. They stopped in awe at the shape running towards them. This great man, like a giant, roaring. And, well, they had no time to summon up a spell, to conjure up some magic. They were all in disarray. They looked this way, they looked that. Was this thing human? They scattered in all directions. And as Bowerman looked around, as the women ran to the north, the east, the south, and the west, and all points between, he chuckled to himself at the great sport he'd had. He went home. He went home with an empty bag. No quarry, no prey had he caught, But he went home with a good story to tell his family. It was a week or two later when he was up on the moor once more, lying on his belly upon the damp ground, when he saw, beyond bowshot, beneath a gorse bush, a hare. This was what he wanted. He crawled over the ground towards the hare. He put an arrow into his bow. He drew the bowstring back. He was about to let the arrow fly when the hare stood on its hind legs and looked straight at him. The strangest behavior. Bowerman in all his years had never seen a creature do this. But what was even stranger is that now the hare on its hind legs began to walk upright towards Bowerman. Bowerman dropped his bow and arrow to the ground as the hare slowly transformed, changing shape from being a wild creature into a plump, middle-aged woman. One of the witches who had been dancing weeks before and had been scattered by Bowerman. And this woman, she said nothing, but she merely smiled and pointed at that great hunter. Bowerman was about to step forwards when the woman disappeared. A cackle left in the air. And Bowerman felt his feet stuck, not in mud, but stuck to the ground. He tried to pull his feet away, but he could not move. And then he saw his legs change to rock, and he felt the pit of his stomach become solid. He called for help. He tried to call for help, but his tongue had turned to rock. His shoulders, his arms, his hands, his chin, his nose, his head, his hat. He could not move, but he could think. And the thoughts he had were of his family. The thoughts he had were of his home. The thoughts he had were that he would never, ever go home or be with his family again. He stood there, solid granite. He was so heavy, his feet, his legs, his hips, they sunk into the ground. Later, his wife and children, they went up onto the moor looking for Bowerman. They did not find him. They found his bow and his arrow, and they never found out what had become of him. Bowerman had seen them as they came up onto the moor, and he tried to wave to them. He tried to call to them. But he was solid granite. He had become it on that day, and he has become it ever since. So, if you go up onto Dartmoor, go and visit Bowermans Nose, and you will see the shape of that tor in the shape of a man. So, that story must be true, mustn't it? I hope you enjoyed those stories based on the objects here in the museum's collection. And we all look forward very much to seeing you again very soon when RAMM reopens later.